You're listening to the Sisters in Loss podcast, a faith-based grief and loss podcast for Black women, where you will hear stories of miscarriage, infant loss, stillbirth, and infertility to learn there is a testimony in tragedy. You will learn how to heal, gain clarity, find hope and peace, and turn your pain into your purpose after loss. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee. I want to welcome and thank you for joining me on the podcast, Torria.
Thank you. It's a blessing. I'm so glad to be a part of this podcast today. Thank you so much for inviting me.
No problem. So I'd like to hear a little bit about yourself and what you do with the community.
Okay. Well, again, my name is Torria Driver, and I started working for Fertility Centers of Illinois back in 1998. Where there was not a whole lot of African-American women part of our patient load. So it's kind of funny how I got there. I call it a divine intervention because I was supposed to be working. I had quit my job at the Great Lakes Naval Hospital where I worked in the gynae clinic, and I was looking for something new and something different because I was getting complacent there, and it just didn't feel stable anymore. So I went out and found another job at another gynae clinic in Skokie, and so I gave my 2-week notice. On Friday before the Monday I was supposed to start my job, I was told at 3 o'clock that afternoon when I was about to punch out that position is not available, that the young lady that was leaving decided to stay. So I was without a job, and so I went to pick up my son. I was upset and crying. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I went to pick up my son, and I was talking to one of the parents there, and she was just telling me, go to Highland Park Hospital. They'll hire you. But Highland Park area, there's not a lot of African Americans there, and I just didn't feel like they would, be interested in hiring me for whatever reason. But I was like, okay. So I went there on Monday. I went there dressed up, ready to go for an interview. And I got there, and at Highland Park Hospital, HR interviewed me, filled out my application, and they actually would not let me leave until they found a position for me. So she took me to 3 different departments and told me to basically choose one. Well, I didn't choose the right one because I ended up in the surgery scheduling department, which was most of the time it was just very dysfunctional. I was unsatisfied. I didn't feel like I was making a difference there. And so there's a chapel attached to the hospital, and I would go over to the chapel at lunchtime. I'd just take a break and just go sit in the chapel and just pray. I'm like, God, just open up a door for me. Just find me something that I love to do where I can help others, that I can stay at for a long time. And so my friend that I got a job there at the surgery department with me decided that she was going to leave and she was going to work for the reproductive endocrinology in the medical office building. And I was like, well, just check with them to see if they have another position available for me. And she called them right away, and it's like, yeah, come over now. So I went over, I spoke to the nurse. She said, come back on Friday. HR will be here. So I came back on Friday, met HR, signed all the paperwork, and here I am today. This was 1998, so I'm here almost 22 years later. And so God really answered that prayer, and I'm grateful. So even after a couple of days of working at the Fertility Centers of Illinois, I just felt like I was supposed to be there. There was this I just gelled with the nurse that I was working with and the doctor that I was working with, and it was just flowing so easily and smoothly. I just knew that it was an answered prayer. And then with the patients in the beginning, it was kind of hard to gain their trust. But once I did, and it was just so amazing, and I just loved it so much. I loved it so much that I probably would do even if I didn't get paid for it. That's how much I love it.
I love that. So I would love for you to take us on your journey to motherhood and share with us how your infertility journey.
Okay, so my infertility journey is a little bit different, I think, from others in a way that there's a little bit of shame in it, more than just your typical, me and my partner are trying to get pregnant, and it's just not happening for us. For me, it was different because, first of all, we were military people at the time, so the insurance was not very good. We didn't have very good coverage. So thank God that I work at Fertility Centers of Illinois, and they worked with me with that. So, and then just by me working in the field, I knew a little bit more than the average woman, and knew, what to expect, what to anticipate. But still, in that, I was still a little bit hesitant to go through fertility treatment. So my fertility was like a secondary fertility, where we had one child already. My child was already 8. Even before me and my husband got married, we talked about having children. And we were like, we're going to have, 3 or 4 children. And we talked about adopting children and all these things that we were going to do. But my husband had 2 children from previous relationships. So once we had our first son, which happened, it happened easily. I wasn't even really trying to have a baby at that time, but I ended up pregnant and we had him. And then my husband decided he was done, but didn't tell me that he really didn't want to have any more children. He had 3, I had 1, and I wanted more. And so when I finally, I'm like, my son is 8. I really want to have more children. That was my desire. I love children. I love babies. I've always have loved babies. Even as a teenager, I would just, the neighborhood babysitter, let me watch your baby. I really love babies. And so I knew that I was meant to be a mother, and I wanted to have more than one child. So when I presented it to my husband, I'm like, look, I really want, to do this. So we finally tried a couple of times with my gynae, giving me some Clomid medication, which is an oral medication. And back then, they didn't do much monitoring with the Clomid. So you take a pill for 5 days, and then you have relations between day 2 and 14 of your cycle. But it was like those times where I'm like telling my husband, okay, I took the Clomid, and this is where we need to be intimate. And it was like he was backing off. He gave me such a hard time, and I couldn't. And then it caused so much discord within a relationship, and hurt and pain. I was bitter. I'm like, why are you doing this? And so it was just, he had checked out. He did not want to have any more children. And then I was stuck. I'm in this relationship. I'm in this marriage. What am I supposed to do? I want to have another baby. It was part of my fertility was him not being 100% on board and not cooperating 100%. The other half is that, we tried for a couple of months and nothing happened. And so I confided in one of my coworkers, like, this is happening. And she was like, well, why don't you just talk to one of the doctors here? And I'm like, yeah, but I work with these doctors, so I didn't feel comfortable doing that. I'm like, this is my intimate stuff, and which I'm sure most women feel like this is my intimate stuff. And she's like, no, don't worry about it. Just go ahead and talk to them and see what they have to say. So I went and talked to one of the doctors. We did the evaluation. I had a saline sonohystogram. Everything looked good on paper. Finally, my husband needed to bring in a semen sample, and that was like pulling teeth to get him to provide a semen sample. And I've noticed that throughout the years when we get African-American couples, and that's one of the things that the males deal with is producing a sample in a cup. And so I had that issue with my husband that he didn't want to do that. And I don't know if there's some shame along with that or if they've been told that, this was bad or something like that. But I feel like there's something centered around that. So we had the hardest time getting him to just agree to doing this. And so finally, we was able to get the sample, and we brought the sample in. And while I was going through all of this, my husband got orders that he was moving to another location as well. He was moving to another state. So what we did with that sample is that we froze that sample, because I wasn't going to get another one out of him. So thank God that they had the technology to freeze the sample. So they actually split the sample up, and I think we had about 5 different samples from that one production that we brought in, and they froze the sample. They did the semen analysis, so we knew the count and motility. So I ended up doing IVF, for fertilization, and with medication. I believe we used gonal medication to stimulate the ovaries, and I went through the whole 9 yards of the progesterone injections, which was really hard to do, and they were painful, but I used heat to the area where I was giving the injections and kind of massaged it a little bit, and that did help somewhat. We ended up with 4 embryos, and I was 31 years old at the time, and I went through this. So, and I was kind of disappointed. I was expecting more, but still grateful that I had the 4 embryos. I had 2 really good embryos, and they had just started to do blastocysts. Blastocysts are day 5 embryo transfers versus day 3 embryo transfers. And that just a more developed embryo at that point. So on day 5, we transferred 2, hoping to get 1. And thank God for the blessing. I ended up with twins. Today, my twins are 17-year-old. I have boy-girl twins. So I'm just grateful to God for that friend nudging me along and me knowing about the technology of fertility. So that's my thing, is that I want other people to know that the technology is out there. And yes, even though I hear from my patients that I come in there, especially the African-American patients, and the other people that are there just don't look like me. But it's for you too, you know. So as the years have gone by, I see more and more African-American women coming in for treatment. Back in 1998 or 2000, we had this board with these babies on it. So every time somebody would deliver a baby, they would send a picture to us and we put it on the board. And when we get an African-American couple in, they would look at this board and they was like, yeah, well, but where are all the African-American babies? I'm like, we're not really, you know, seeking treatment like, you know, the other populations. So that's my fertility journey. So my children, they're 17 years old and they'll be 18 years old soon. So there you go.
Yes. And back to your point about just African-American couples not seeking fertility treatments, a lot of that does have to do with a lot of shame. And it's a cultural aspect, as you mentioned, in your example with your husband not wanting to actually give some type of semen analysis. You know, if you go back and look at some of the older movies that we love, the classics, that's always a joke in those movies about men not being able to provide in that manner or having low sperm count. And it was always looked down upon for and men, and that's probably why a lot of women are more willing to do it and go through all the treatments. I mean, think of all the things that we do to our bodies, but men don't even want to do that basic thing. So I think it's a cultural thing that definitely has taken place. But now I hope that, you know, with you sharing your story and the work that Fertility Center of Illinois is doing, that it is encouraging more people to seek alternative fertility treatments into their way of growing their family. So now, have you seen an uptick of people of color, of Black people actually coming into the clinics? And then what are the other obstacles? You think financial obstacles are another reason why you don't see as many African-American people come in and actually seek out fertility treatments?
Erica, I honestly believe that a lot of African-American people don't seek treatment because of the shame attached to it, first of all. And it's a very intimate thing that they're coming in here and they're telling, you know what, I can't do this on my own, right? And I think there's a cultural thing where, and I don't think I said this, but I never told my family that I did IVF. So I never disclosed that to my family. So I went through treatment, and I had, you know, a friend, a couple of coworkers at work that I could confide in. Thank God for that, the support that I got from that. But I never told my family that I went through fertility treatment, and they don't know that. They may, you know, maybe because I work here, but we never had that conversation. I never had that conversation. That I think is a cultural thing. I think it's a religious thing where, you know, if God wanted me to, He would, you know, if it was meant for me, you know, God would, you know, do this for me. Well, there's just so many different aspects. And now, yes, today I see more African-American women coming in to seek treatment compared to back in 1998, the early 2000s, where, you know, we would get an African-American couple coming in and we're like, okay, I felt like when they would come in that they would do a treatment or just come in for an initial consult, and then they would just disappear, that they wouldn't stay for the full term. I think when you told that you only have limited insurance and we're only going to cover this much and, you know, treatment costs so much more, that because of the uncertainty that's attached with it, then that's maybe why you don't want to put, you know, your monies into this thing that's not a sure thing. Maybe that's one of the things that we're dealing with as well, that we don't know what it's going to look like at the other end of it. So, and when I'm talking to my patients, giving them support, I tell them we don't know what this journey is going to look like. So you could get pregnant right after this consultation. You can get pregnant right after this saline, or it could be 3-4 years down the line. We just don't know. You can have good numbers. You can have a good egg count. You can have a good antral follicle count. You can have a good anti-malarial hormone, and still, you know, it may not happen right away. So it's investing the time. With treatment, you're going to have to come in for multiple visits. You're going to have to tell people your personal stuff. They're going to want to know about intercourse, how often you're having intercourse, or they're going to want to know all these intimate things about you. And work schedules could be an issue issue, or couple. And I've seen over the years too where couples have had issues with breaking up in relationships, or couples both they start off on the same page and one of them don't want to continue. I'm just doing this because he wants to, because I've given up hope. So there's a lot of different avenues to answer that question. Yeah, I feel like today we're seeing more African American couples, but it's still not up to our Caucasian counterpart. I think we ran some numbers back in 2014, if I'm not mistaken, 2014 or 2015, and the African American women were seeking treatment at a third percent of the time as our Caucasian counterparts. So it's getting better. The word is getting out more, and we're trusting a little bit more. And also, I got to just add to it, too, some of the cultural things that we dealt with way back when we were African-American. People were not treated well, that we were not always given good treatment. We were always, sometimes we were rejected for treatment, and then there were testing done of us that we didn't even know. And it just brings it back to Henrietta Lotz, I think her name is. There's a book out about her cancer and her cancer treatment. Cancer tells how she was rejected for treatment. So we have that in our culture too, so not to trust. And I even remember hearing what my mother, and I'm going to another area, and I'm sorry for that, but I just to make a point here is that my aunt had breast cancer, way back many years ago, and then they had all these myths out. When you go through that and they start to do surgery, then the air hits it and then it spreads, and that's not the truth, right? So there's many myths out there that stops women from seeking treatment as well.
Yes, absolutely. And I thank you for bringing up all of those points. Those are all excellent. So does your family know now, since you've been doing this work for so long, that you did seek IVF with your twins, or is that still something that is still kind of, that you kind of keep close to your chest?
Yeah, close to my chest. I know you're familiar with Reverend Stacey Edwards Dunn. Fertility Centers of Illinois has a partnership with her where we provide a free IVF cycle for her organization. They have the Head, Heels, and Hankies August each year, and we've been a part of that. And she has written a book called Hope. Can't remember the whole name of it, but it's.
I think it's called Hold On to Hope.
Hold On to Hope. Thank you for that. Yeah. My story is actually in that book. So.
Awesome.
My story is actually in that book, and no, I haven't had this conversation right out with my family or even with my children. I haven't felt comfortable with doing that still.
Gotcha. I understand that, and I think that it's still definitely a cultural thing on, not sharing those type of things. But I'm sure at some point in time, especially with your children, you may share with them. One thing that I've realized too with the Sisters-in-Law's podcast is that when Michelle Obama came out with her book last November and shared that she had to go through two IVF cycles for her daughters, a lot more women were willing to even come out and share, because they were still very kind of afraid, even in this podcast medium, to share on audio form a story that they haven't really told even out loud to their family. So I'm thankful that, people are being more willing to share in this manner, even though it's still a very sensitive and touchy subject. When it comes to sharing, this most intimate and personal moments, especially when we have so much shame and stigma attached to it. So what are some ways that you would recommend for women to come in, especially if they have not had the best treatment at other clinics, because one thing that I realized, a lot of women in the Sisters-in-Law's community particularly have to go shop around for a fertility place because it's not necessarily not getting the right treatment, or they may not feel like their voice is being heard. So what would be some recommendations you would give to a woman who's seeking a different fertility center like Fertility Center of Illinois, and some ways that they can make sure that their voice is being heard?
Right. I like that question. So this is what I would tell my patients, and we have patients who come to us from other clinics, and they've not felt like they've not gotten the best treatment, or they didn't feel like they've been heard. But I think it's more than just going to a clinic and saying, help me, and I want you to do this, that, and that. It's finding the person in the clinic, the nurse who's going to take the time out to listen. I think listening, having a person that will listen to your needs is number one. Having a compassionate person who's finding a clinician who's going to have the compassion to help you as well, who's going to take the time out, who's not going to rush you through. If you have the questions, to take the time out to address those questions, because those questions are important to you and not just brush over them. So just finding a clinic, first of all, you got to look at the numbers. Yeah, you want to look at the numbers, the pregnancy rates at that clinic to make sure that, it's a successful clinic. So you look at the pregnancy rates, and you can do that by going to the START website, SART, and looking at each clinic. If they report to START, because not all of them do, but you can see the pregnancy rates on that START. So you want to have a clinic that will have good numbers, and you also want to make sure, talk to people, and don't be, ashamed to open up and say, hey, I'm going through this, and what do you won't realize how many people are going through this until you open up and start talking about it and finding out there's more people are going through it than you may realize. Talking to other people and researching that clinic and finding that clinic that's appropriate for you. You may want somebody who's compassionate. You may want to not. Some people want very little information. Just tell me where to go and what to do, and I'm doing it. Some people want detailed information. They want to write everything out. They want to see everything. So just finding that clinic or the clinic, if you go into a clinic and you feel like you're not getting what you need from that particular doctor or that set of nurses, then why not go to another physician in that clinic? If you like the clinic, but you're not getting what you need out of that doctor, then maybe find another physician or a nursing staff member to help you and guide you through that. So again, I just think just finding someone who will just listen to your needs and who are willing to go the extra mile. I mean, we as clinicians, we get busy, sometimes, and we sometimes have difficult patients that we're dealing with. But finding that one that's just going to really take the time out to listen to your particular needs, your unique needs, because everybody wants something different. Yeah, we're here for the same thing. We all want to get pregnant, but there's, different avenues to that, to the path for pregnancy, and just finding, that person who's going to take the time out to your expectations.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Another thing that has come up in the community is for women who have gone through IVF and have had a success, right? They've had their one or their two babies, and the thought that now, they're fertile now, all of a sudden, but they still have to go back through that same process based off of whatever their infertility diagnosis is in order to conceive again. So a lot of women in the community are always like, especially around this time of year where it's the holidays, you're around more family, you have this miracle baby that you are taking care of, these toddlers. But then your family starts to ask you, when are you having more kids, So have you seen repeat clients come in where, after they've had a success, they come back for a second round or third round to have, or they may do a frozen embryo transfer from a previous round to have more children?
Yes. I have seen patients come back for second, third, fourth. I even have the patient came back for a fifth. So, yeah, there are patients who come back, and some don't need to come back. I have seen women who come through, and I just got to be real here, that some people come through and they go through treatment. They do the IUIs, they do the drugs, the fertility drugs, they do the IVF, and I've even seen women who've gone as far as using donor egg, and still, they're not successful. And then I've seen some of these women come back and say, you know what, I went through all of this today, and I just give up. I can't do anymore. I'm done with this. And a couple months later down the road, the woman is coming back saying, you know what, I just had a positive pregnancy test, and could this be true? Could I be pregnant? So sometimes, no matter, it's not all science, is what I tell my patients. It's not all science. Sometimes it's just that letting go and just letting things be, and sometimes there's success even with no treatment. But with those women who does need a little bit more assistance with getting pregnant, yes, I've seen women come back for first, second, and third. So you go through an IVF cycle. Like I went through my IVF cycle, I had 4 embryos. We transferred 2. And unfortunately, my relationship didn't work out with my husband. We're divorced now. But I still have 2 embryos frozen. I still have 2 frozen embryos. And I don't want to discard them because I feel like that's not the right thing to do. So, and what so they're still here frozen until I figure out what I'm going to do with those. But I've had patients who've come through and who've exhausted everything, even using donor egg. And there was one patient who told me, she came to me with tears in her eyes. She's like, my test is negative. I'm done. We've done everything we can. So we're just going to, be done with this at this point. And I brought up, I'm like, okay, wait, what can we do here? I just feel like there's always something to be done. There's something to be done. So I mentioned to her, I said, have you looked into embryo adoption? And she was like, what's that? So I gave her the information on that. And this woman in particular, she got pregnant with twins. And then she came back years later, 3 or 4 years later, from that same batch of donated embryos and got pregnant again. And now she's got a couple more and she wants to come back for another. So, I think there's value in freezing the embryos in case you want to continue family building instead of, discarding them. That's something that you're going to have to discuss and something that you're going to have to look at going through IVF. What if I get 8, 9 embryos? Are you going to have 8, 9 babies? So just having that on your mind to think about what I'm going to do with these embryos, right? If I get all these embryos, what am I going to do with them? So, yeah.
Yes, and I'm happy that you talked about embryo adoption because it kind of goes into my next question about just egg freezing and for Black women of color to think about preserving their fertility before it gets to that time where they can't, they have younger eggs and more eggs to choose from. So in that, have you seen a lot more people who are younger, under 30, or even for folks who are 35 and above, are they coming in and actually doing more egg freezes, especially for if they're just at a place in their life where they're ready to have children?
That's a great question, Erica. And I can tell you, when I started looking more at this, we had a little team going on at the time to bring in more. And my thing was community outreach and just increasing African-American patient loads here at Fertility Centers of Illinois. So I was looking at the numbers back then, and it was 2015. And when I was doing the research, it said 0% of African-American women were freezing their eggs back then. But I must admit that there are more now, but not as many as, there could be more. And I'm saying that I've had a couple, maybe 5 or 6 African-American women that I know of that have come through that are freezing eggs, but they're older. So I think there's definitely value in getting to these women younger, under age 30, where, where their eggs are, better quality. And once you go through an IVF cycle and freeze those eggs stay the same age. So you can freeze at age 28 and you can come back at age 40. I just got married. My career is off the ground. And I'm ready to start my family building. Those eggs stay the same age. So they're frozen in time. We don't know about, the development or the fertilization until we actually fertilize them, of course. So there's some things you still don't know about egg freezing, but at least that you have the insurance that I do have eggs in case, you're older and you're 48, 49 and your egg supply is non-existent. You have those eggs, that you can go back to and use them, and that gives you insurance. So I think there's great value in sharing this information with younger African-American women to come in and freeze their eggs, even if they don't know for sure that they want to have, a baby, but they just think maybe, even if it's a maybe, you can still do that and preserve your fertility that way.
Yes, thank you for sharing that. Now, I hope that we definitely get back to that younger generation and have them start to think about that, because a lot of insurance programs in different states are now offering the option for people to actually spend the money, and sometimes they pay 100% just to freeze your eggs. So that definitely takes a burden off in the future, especially if they want to preserve and just take time out before they have children. So thank you for mentioning that. I wanted to make sure that I captured that question as well. So for my listeners who have gone through IVF, are still, feeling shameful about it, what encouraging words can you leave with them to help them as they continue on this journey?
Okay, so for the woman who's feeling shameful, just know that everybody's here for the same reason, and you'll be surprised just opening up to someone what their journey was like, or you may not realize that that person had already gone through IVF and may have some useful tools for you and is able to support you through it. So we're here because we tried to get pregnant and we couldn't, found out we needed assistance, but it's more than, so I just feel like that just opening up and just being open to sharing your story kind of takes the shame away, because if you tell the story, then there's no shame attached to it. So I know that's hard to do with such an intimate thing. But if you can find a couple of people that you know that your stuff would be safe with, and just sharing, if you hear about somebody else who may be going through it and you are going through it, just maybe sharing with them. Telling the story removes the shame, basically. So, and I just feel like there's always an answer for it. We don't know for sure what avenue, if you have that desire to have a baby. We don't know if it's going to be an IUI cycle that's going to do it. We don't know if there's going to be an IVF cycle that may do it for you, or if there's adoption options for you. But I feel like there's always, if you want to have a baby, there's something out there for you, and that we can all have success in that way, whether it's adopting embryos, whether it's adopting a child. And all of it, can be, pricey. I know that adopting children can be pricey as well. But just being open to all aspects of it, and just knowing that I'm going in this place and I don't know what it's going to look like, but I'm just going to be open to, whatever's ahead, and just embracing the journey. And so I feel like lately, I felt like I've always been an encourager with my patients, and I've prayed for patients in the past, but I feel like now I'm offering more, which in the past I wasn't offering as much. And now people are saying, yes, I'm like, do you want to pray? If they're, feeling, yeah, I want to pray. And so more and more women are saying yes to prayer. So I feel like prayer, I've seen some miraculous things happen through prayer, even, with patients getting pregnant that were not even expecting it. So just being spiritually, in line, and just praying and asking God to lead you and guide you, and and asking God to remove the shame.
Yes, we all have to pray and definitely continue to seek God to remove all the shame and the stigma and the silence around just being whatever that is. The fertility challenges we're going through, the infertility diagnosis, the unexplained infertility diagnosis. So I'm happy that you shared on the podcast. So thank you so much, Torria and the Fertility Center of Illinois, for sharing.
Erica, and can I just add one more thing, if that's okay? That's okay.
Oh yes, go right on ahead.
To just some tips on to be properly prepared. So the number one thing you want to do when you're seeking treatment is going to your insurance provider and asking the main question of, do I have fertility coverage? So fertility coverage, if you don't have fertility coverage, there are resources out there that can help pay for, like there's grants and scholarships available. And Erica, if you want, we can provide a list of those for you. There's also studies that you can do that will give you free IVF if you have no insurance coverage, like Fertility Centers of Illinois does studies as well. So just going on the website and looking at those things. And for medication costs, there are programs out there to help pay for medications and who can give you discounts. And there are coupons out there available too. And I just want to say one of my patients who used leuprolide acetate, which used to be $99 back in the day, was about $800 these days, and it's not covered under insurance. So I was able to give her information on GoodRx, which is a coupon, a discounted medication program. So they actually took $500 off of her leuprolide acetate, and working with that pharmacy who would take that coupon. So there's many options out there to help pay, for coverage if you don't have any coverage. But the first question you want to ask your provider is if you have fertility coverage, if it's just diagnostic only, or if you're self-paid, going to your gynae to have all the diagnostic coverage done before you even come to fertility. That may save you a little bit of money there. And if you have to get like a loan, there's companies that will give you a loan for medication and for treatment. But just making sure you use that money wisely. Like if you're going through pharmacy and you have this loan for money, you don't want to use all of it on your loan money. You want to make sure that you're getting the best cost for that. So you may have to do some shopping around and advocating for yourself to make sure that you're utilizing the funds as best possible and limiting the amount of money that you're putting on medications. Sometimes with insurance, there's like a lifetime max of like a set amount, like a $10,000 lifetime max. And so you want to know what it means to you. That means that if it's for medication and for fertility coverage, then if you have $10,000, medication itself can take up that $10,000. So you want to make sure that you know exactly what your insurance is covering, and if it's a different pocket for medications versus fertility treatment, because you don't want to use all your monies up on the prescriptions, because you can find discounted medications. You can possibly get the company to give you a discount on the medications. You can get maybe some samples from your clinic and asking your clinic nurse to help you with the cost of the medication, or to provide information to help pay the cost for the medication. So I just wanted to also just add that information in there too.
Yes, that is excellent information. So thank you again, Torria, for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode. For show notes and more information on today's guest, go to sistersinloss.com. If you have not joined our online community, go to sistersinloss.com, as well as sign up for our newsletter. We want you to be a part of the community so you can know all of the events that we have planned on as Sisters in Loss. Go to sistersinloss.com, sign up for our newsletter, join our online community, and stay connected with us. Talk to you soon.